Welcome to the Alternative Leader podcast. My name is Mary Williams and I'm the Mind Architect. I'm also founder of the Alternative Leader Academy and author of It Begins With You. This podcast is dedicated to inspiring the leaders of today to lead with intention, both in their personal and their professional lives. My guests from across the world share their challenges, their knowledge and their experiences so that we can learn from these powerful insights to help us lead with strength, determination and compassion. Hello and welcome to the Alternative Leader podcast. My name is Mary Williams and I'm the Mind Architect. Today's guest is Corey Gaidzionis. He is founder of the Big Emotions Academy. Corey is a passionate, heart-centered entrepreneur who's on a mission, and it's really all about creating positive change using very simple tools to teach emotional intelligence to equip the next generation of leaders to have their own motivational superpowers. He has a background as a personal trainer and a coach, but he recognised the need for a personal development program that reached young people in a way that makes sense to them rather than the usual more adult-like perspective. Corey has recently published his first book, The Little Book of Big Emotions, and is now in the process of getting it out to young people and schools across the globe. Corey went through an incredibly difficult life experience, having an employee of his actually die in his arms. This radically altered Corey's outlook on life and also changed him from what he describes as an angry, arrogant, hostile man into a gentle soul who's exploring the world and his new self. So let's hear it from Corey. So Corey, it's over to you.
Hi, Mari. Thanks for having me here today. I'm super grateful. I love the work that you're doing out in the world, and that's why I reached out to have this conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess for me, just thinking about what we spoke about before, our little catch up before we started, like for me, it's about my journey of like going from being this really angry, arrogant, aggressive guy in the world to where I am today. And this exploration, I guess the question that's driven me so much is, why do men need to hit rock bottom to create change in their life? And that's a question that I think about a lot. And that's exactly what happened for me. So I call it an out of sequence event now is kind of what the psychology world has labeled it, I guess. But it can be, so an out of sequence event for me was like I went to work and I'd gone to work and I'd given Brendan some work to do. I'd said, hey, mate, I need you to move this still. And this was all very in line with who I was as a man, right? Like super driven, super focused, people pleaser, get things done and achieve an outcome, right? Like that was just to give some background of who I was. So I'd had a phone call from someone, new client, getting a lot of work from them. So went into the factory and said, hey, I need you guys to move this steel. Went back out and said to the client, yeah, all sorted. No dramas. And then I've wandered back into the factory and it's just dead silent. And this is like a construction factory with compressors and spray guns and steel clanging. And it was the quietest environment you could imagine. Like it was just absolute silence. And someone said to me, don't go up there. And I was in the military and I've had training in rescue and whatnot. So I went up and got involved in the rescue. And then someone said, Corey, go sit with Brendan. So I ended up sitting with Brendan and basically holding him. And for context, Brendan was a guy that had followed me around my career. I'd actually fired him from previous places and he'd come to other companies that I was working at. And I'm like, do not employ that guy. And then in this particular job, they came to me and said, hey, like Brendan, you know Brendan from these companies, like what's he like? And I ended up just saying, look, if he's capable of doing the job, just put him on a trial. And he ended up working there for about 18 months. So I'd kind of been like passing and building a bit of rapport with him. And then on the morning, I've asked him to move this steel, and that's the steel that he got crushed under. So for me, the trauma, like as As bad as it was having someone die in my arms, it was the guilt of like blaming myself for his death. I got him the job there. I told him to move that steel in the morning. If I didn't do those things, then that wouldn't have happened. And that was really the thing, that the terminology, I guess, that I used was broke my brain, like my brain box. If my brain was in a box, it was broken. And that really, I guess that gave me an opportunity to start exploring, start healing, right? So it was my rock bottom, and that's a big rock bottom. For some people, it's divorce. For some, it's different for everybody, right? What rock bottom looks like. But for me, that was my rock bottom. And I guess I started to explore the question, if my brain is so broken. So there's two things that I did. I started to explore the question, if my brain is so broken, why can't I rebuild it however I want? And then that really became my mantra. Like, I don't want to be this. I don't want my wife to see me as an angry, arrogant asshole anymore.
Yeah.
I want to be seen as kind, loving, caring. And it's taken a long time to shift. Like that was 30 years of patterns, right? Like, and sometimes people go, you can just turn it off, but I've yet to see anyone who can just turn it off. I work with a lot of men, and it's a period of time, and I've refined my processes in doing that through my own journey. What works and what doesn't work. Typically, what works for one human will normally work for most people. So it's been this exploration, and in that journey, I guess it's like, I guess I have high expectations of myself. So when I slip up, I'm like really judgmental and like really harsh on myself. And I guess that's kind of been my journey of like exploration. You know, it was funny. Like I kind of have a standing appointment with my psychologist just once a month, and we normally have something to talk about. And I'm like, I'm really good. Like I haven't been triggered. I haven't been upset. I'm kind of just, I'm just flowing along. I've got all these things happening, and it's, you know, so it was nice just to, and I think I still, like when I research mental health and explore all this stuff, like I see that like people have like employee assistance programs in Australia, and like nobody uses them.
Yeah.
Like it's just crazy to me. Like you can get 12 appointments with a psychologist for free through your company. If they said here's $1,200 worth of movie tickets, everyone's going to go and take them, right?
Yeah. And
when people do go to an EAP, which was my experience before Brennan died, I went to an EAP because I had a car accident. I was in a position where my work was so stressful that instead of going to work and telling someone, hey, I'm not coping, I crashed my car on the way to work deliberately to like not go to work.
Wow.
Which is such an extreme. Yeah. And it just goes to show like the extreme nature of my personality, right? And then they sent me to it. They said, oh, we've got an EAP program, like go and see a psychologist. And I went and did 3 sessions and went, oh yeah, I'm good now. You know, I quit that job 3 weeks later and I went and worked somewhere else. So it was like, and then I just started the whole cycle again, right? So I think it's really important to I think it's just important to kind of share that, like, even though I'd hit rock bottom before, it wasn't rock bottom enough to create change, you know?
So there's a couple of things that I sort of wanted to ask, really. You describe yourself as this sort of angry, hostile person. Why do you think that was? Why were you like that anyway?
I think I just grew up in a really hostile environment. Like my mum, I did mental health first aid last year, and I probably realised that my mum was probably bipolar, maybe even multiple personality disorder, didn't really take the medication, and her way of dealing with that was to beat me up, basically. So I grew up and my parents didn't get along, and my dad, I had this belief that when my dad smacked me, like, it was justified, like I'd done something wrong to deserve that. And that's not the case. And I've spoken to my dad about that recently, but it's so, I guess, this childhood trauma. And then, so I guess there was 2 things that I did out of my childhood. I went to the gym and got big. So I built a tank, an armory. And then I carried around behind the armor this anger, right? So the two of them was my protection mechanism. So if something that I perceive to be doesn't meet my expectations, then anger would be my go-to tool to respond to that. And I think back to sitting in boardrooms and like just losing my shit at people and them not firing me. And I'm like, I've had conversations with those CEOs. I'm like, man, I must have been really good at what I did for you guys not to fire me in those situations.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we all have trauma from our childhoods, even if we have perfect childhoods. I see my son at the moment going through stuff that I'd love to be in a perfect world where my kids have no trauma they don't need to resolve as adults. But the reality is there's 100 people that they meet that aren't me and aren't my wife. So, and those interactions and the things of teenagers and the things that they carry, and all we can do is try to support them in that stuff, right? So I think for me, just having that childhood trauma and just going, I need to protect myself, basically. So I just closed my heart over and just went, how do I protect myself? And anger and aggression were my go-to tools for doing that.
It's interesting. I think, that's quite a common sort of story in some respects, and, definitely kind of resonates with me. My mother was, probably undiagnosed bipolar. My eldest daughter actually has bipolar now. So we kind of know it's in the family. And was very violent and kind of neglectful, but actually also could be incredibly loving. So a real clash of emotions. And I grew up very angry, and unusually I think it's interesting because a lot of women don't admit to being angry. Seems to be kind of okay for men to admit to being angry, but not women. And I struggled with that all through my life, probably into my early 40s, and when I stumbled on the therapy that I do and kind of managed to clear that in one session. And like you, it was all childhood related. You kind of hold it, don't you, like lava under the surface, and then any time there's a fissure, it doesn't matter where it is, it kind of explodes and erupts. And just clearing that is amazing. So that I totally understand kind of why you'd have that reaction. And actually it's kind of reminding me of a client I had last year who very similar thing, a very difficult childhood, became a bodybuilder. Like you said, putting on that tank, that kind of armory. So it's making me sort of smile to remember him. So you were this kind of very, very angry person, and then you went through this, life-changing event. And it's interesting how you say that you blamed yourself because it was you that had hired him and you that had told him to do that. At what point do you think that you were able to recognize that wasn't true? And, we ask people to do things all every day and nothing happens. So what did it take to shift that?
I think just doing the work with psychologists and and it was probably, I don't know, it was probably a good 18 months to 2 years to shift that, to let go of that. It was really difficult. Even going to Brendan's funeral, there's actually quite a load there, actually.
Yeah.
It's really strange. I don't normally have a load with that, but that question is just kind of put a load in.
If you don't want to answer, it's fine.
No, it's fine. I think it's important to, the load will shift, right, by communicating and talking about it. And I think that's an important thing for people to know, that we can feel things, and when we talk about it and communicate it, it doesn't have to be stuck,
Yeah.
I think like even just on the anniversary, I couldn't even be in Perth in the city itself. I had to go out of the city, like I just couldn't be in. It just felt constricted, I just felt constricted. I think just working with coaches, and I think starting to, I guess the hard part for me was going to the funeral and not knowing that Brendan had a 1-year-old granddaughter.
Yeah.
And like going like, and there was a realization that we only ever know what people share of themselves. But like, I guess I was asking questions like, could I have found that information out by being more curious with him in that environment, like, so I guess I had deep shame around even not knowing who Brendan was really deep down, beyond that he had trauma and had problems, but I was in no place to even have a conversation about that because I was living in my own trauma, right?
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? When you're within your own trauma, and as you said, we see so many men, especially with this, and obviously there are women out there too, but I do think that women tend to chat to someone, even if it's a friend, and men don't. And I think we're so in our own heads when we've got that trauma. We're so busy trying to manage ourselves and our emotions and our thinking that we almost don't have that capacity to be curious about others. We don't have that space available, do we, to be interested in other people in some respects?
Yeah, so I can't pinpoint an exact moment to go back to that question about when did I stop blaming myself, but I think I just went into the work. Like I was seeing the workplace psychologist, and I quickly realized that she had an agenda to get me back to work and not to actually heal me. And then I went, I just went to my GP, who I've been with for 20 years. So I was really lucky that I had this guy who he kind of knew me from a young man to, and I was able to go and like sit in his office, and as much as he didn't cope with me crying in his office, I would go to his office and I would cry and get things out, and I would say, hey, I don't feel like this person's actually doing the right thing, you know. And then he kind of introduced me to a psychiatrist, and then I went to another psychologist, and then ultimately I ended up going to my own coach, who had like a mix of East and Western philosophy and inner child experience. And but it was even interesting in that I was seeing this psychologist, and I stopped seeing her because I said, like, I'm having all these marital problems, and like I feel like my marriage is like really like there's a lot of strain in a relationship when someone's going through a lot of trauma, right? And I had these expectations of my wife that she would change and meet me where I'm at, right? And when I had the conversation with this psychologist about it, she was like, it felt like this like man hating, like you've got to take responsibility for like your part in this, and I just like, and I never went back to her. I just went, I'm done with that. Like she's not for me anymore. And there was, and the truth is, there was probably a lot of work to be done in that, and that's what I've done over the last. But I wasn't. You need to be ready to hear it sometimes, and I wasn't ready to hear it in that moment in time. I guess I wanted my wife to kind of hold my hand and change and accept that I was different, but that. I guess when we're doing our work, it takes time for people to A, believe that it's true, and B, see it and actually like really believe it, you know, like it's taken time for my wife to kind of catch up with the change that I've made. And I guess for me, and I think this is what a lot of men struggle with, and something that I struggle with, is like, I would respond with anger, but it would be like, so scaled back. So like my angle's on a 10, it would be scaled back to like a 2, but her response or reaction to it was like it was a 10 still, right? So she was still, it didn't matter whether it was a 2 or a 10, her reaction was the same. And then I was just like, well, what's the point? If I like, so then I was kind of, and it took me a long time to, and I guess that comes down to like, I needed to like accept myself for who I was, right? I needed to love myself. And when you have like a mother wound like I did, it's like it's very hard to trust and all those things, right? So it was it's just interesting observing that, like, we can often have, like, when we're doing the work, we have expectations that other people just accept that we've changed, and that's not necessarily. Often people know us as version 1.0, and we're on version 10, and they're still seeing us because their experience is so visceral in version 1.0 that they're kind of still stuck reacting there.
It's really interesting that you bring that up, actually. I think, you know, from my point of view, obviously with the work that I do with people, it's all about your self-worth. That's absolutely at the core, whether we're working on leadership, communicating with your team, or, you know, deep therapeutic issues, family issues, etc. It's all about that self-worth, isn't it? It's all about believing that you are worthy. And it's only when you get to that point, I think, that then you can almost focus on the relationships. And what I found, one of the things that sort of led me to do the work that I do was I found that I would go and see somebody for some sort of support for me. And like you say, they kind of couldn't do the relationship piece, or they couldn't do the parenting piece. And I realized that actually I had all of these skills, because I did relationship stuff, and I'd done so much work on myself, and I'd got 5 kids, and I'd worked in schools and all this. And so actually, one of the reasons that I like the work I do is because, I can talk to somebody about communicating with their team, and then the next session we're talking about communicating with their teenage son. And I think that actually that's really important when you're going through that process, because as you say, your life is that whole process, and that expectation that your wife would just go, oh great, I see all these internal changes that you've made, and I will now completely react differently to you, is not unusual. It is not it's not fair. And so I think that having somebody who can work with you, both of you, sometimes I quite often end up working with both members of a couple. And in fact, when I do relationship work, I work with both people separately and kind of get them to be themselves. And then actually often, the bridge is either there or it's not. I think that's really fascinating, that for you, that you are able to kind of remember that. And I guess the thing I would say about the therapist being so sort of overt with you is, that I think it's about guiding that person to recognize that for themselves. And then it's more palatable, because you are then recognized, like, why do you think your wife is reacting in this way, and what could be going on for her? And but like you say, absolutely. and I actually love the way that you talk about having different coaches and different psychologists and psychiatrists and therapists, because I think a lot of people try one person and then go, oh, that doesn't work for me. And like you say, a lot of the ones that come with companies do have an agenda to get you back into work. And my belief is that if you get the person well and healthy, they'll naturally go back to work anyway. So I think I love that you actually were able to, within your journey, say, this person's been great for this amount of time, but now I need something different. This person's been great. And that blend of East and West, actually, I love that too.
And it was fascinating, because all my wife actually needed was to express her pain. So we did some stuff together, and all she needed to do was express her pain. And then once she had the opportunity to do that, our relationship improved exponentially.
And that's the thing, isn't it? I think often, we forget that when that person does work, it's going to have an effect on everybody around them, including their children, that they change so much. And I think that is why it's important to include that. But so you went on from this event to not only change yourself, but to become really passionate about working with men. But what I also really love is it's young men that you're wanting, I was just looking at your LinkedIn profile. If anybody wants to look at Corey's LinkedIn profile, it's huge. But you've worked in so many different areas with kids in schools, and the camp experience, that sounds amazing, but really helping our young men, grow into men, rather than these angry, arrogant, as you described yourself. So tell me a bit about that work.
I think I had the desire to what did I miss out on? I joined the Navy at 17, so I had this rite of passage in the Navy, and it wasn't healthy. I won't go into that today. That's a whole podcast of itself. The experience I had with that, but I started exploring this rite of passage, and then I ended up doing a program with Arne Rubenstein, who's the rite of passage expert. He's all over the world at the moment doing it. But basically, there's this African proverb: if you don't challenge your young men to step up, they'll burn down the village to feel the heat. Interesting. And that's kind of, I've butchered that a little bit, but that's the essence of it. Yeah. So what we do is we take young men and young girls as well. So we have different groups, they're separate, but we take them out of their environment, right? And that's challenging instantly. Most of these kids have never camped. They're in a tent. And we really get them to step up and explore who they are, through physical challenge, which is your typical stuff you do on camp, go abseiling, rock climbing, all those kinds of fun things. But what I like to do when I get the boys on camp is I've typically doesn't always work this way, but I like to kind of work with them throughout the year and then get that group on camp because you've kind of built rapport. But my best camps have been with kids who some teachers come in and said, these boys need like a really man, or they're going to just run them. So I end up with these groups that are kind of, the school says are the worst kids in the school, right? And I think they're the best kids in the school when I have the experience with them, right? So, and I just said, all right, let's go around in a circle. Let's get in a circle. And I get the talking stick. I said, look, I just want to know who's in and who's out. Who wants to be here and who doesn't want to be here? So I know. And I passed the stick around, and this one kid, James, everyone said I'm in, right? Because that's no one wants to say I'm not in. So everyone says I'm in, right? And then James says, I'm out. I don't want to be here. Like, and I'm like, and then the stick come back around to me, and I'm like, awesome, James is in. He's like, what do you mean I'm in? I just said I'm out. I go, bro, all I want is honesty, man. Like, that's what I want. So, and then from then on, he was the guy. You know, like he was all in, you know. And it's funny when we challenge the boys, like people don't meditate, right? At all, really, like let alone teenage boys. So on challenge night, I like create this ritual of like, I get a big fire going, I get the teacher to take them out of the camp, and then we walk them back into the camp and they're in silence. And then I go, do you accept the challenge? And they're like, what's the challenge? I'm like, you don't get to know. You just have to decide if you're in or you're out. And if you're in, you're going to become a member of this tribe. So it's like this real ritualistic. And then I blindfold them, and then I walk them down into the bush, and I pull them off one by one, and I drop them in the bush in silence, in pitch black. And I leave them there for 15, 20 minutes. That's enough. And then we bring them back into the circle, and it just blows my mind what young men think about when they're sitting in silence. So like a kid will come back and go, oh, nobody knows this, but my mum's only got like 3 weeks to live. She's going to die from cancer. Oh, I'm not sure if I'm gay or straight because I go to an all boys school, and like when I go to the bus stop, everyone calls me homo. And like, I don't know what that means for my sexuality. So we're having these conversations with young men about, you know, and obviously you have the typical things of like, I'm cold, my bum's sore, like, but they really get past that quickly. And when one person, it's like cracking an egg, right? Once you crack the egg, you can't put the yolk back in. When one kid opens up, they all go, oh, this is safe. You know, and it's just an opportunity. Very so powerful. When someone says, I don't know what my sexuality is, I just ask the question, oh, can I see a show of hands of like who else has experienced this at the local bus stop? You know, and you got 13 boys and 10 of them put their hand up, and then all of a sudden this boy who's felt alone in this experience doesn't feel alone in anymore, you know. Like,
I think that's really, really powerful.
So that's kind of like, and that sets the tone for the week, right? Because then they're cooking for each other, they're being of service to each other, they're doing adventures together, we're walking in the bush. So if a kid wants to come and have a chat with me one-on-one, they'll come and have a conversation. Like in that same group, on the last day, I had the boys, I said, all right, we're just going to sit down for 20 minutes, just go walk along this trail and just spread yourself out 50 meters apart. And this kid come up and he's like, oh, I just wish my parents would get divorced. They hate each other. But
yeah, very common.
And then we had a conversation about, we role modeled how he could go home and have a conversation with his parents. And then I ran into him 6 months later, and he come up, he's like, oh, Corey, my parents are getting on so much better since I told them how I feel about what's going on.
Interesting.
Like, so like that was a catalyst for them to go, oh, we didn't realize this is what we're doing, you know. And then I get boys that come up, you know, like I've had a kid I haven't seen for 3 years because of COVID, and I was in the school, and he came up and knocked on the staff room door and asked me to come outside and have a conversation with him. And that was from that same group of boys that, you know. And then I do this ritual. I have this one ritual that I do that no one else does. There's a lake where we go, and I get everyone up at like 5 a.m. before the sun's up, and I give them 2 minutes basically, and I'm just outrageous. I've got like James Brown, I Feel Good going on like a Yui boom that you can hear across the whole camp. And if kids aren't out of their tents, I'm like flipping tents. I'm like, let's go. Like really, like it's totally different to the silent challenge.
Yeah.
And then we walk to a lake and then we stand around and it's freezing. So like, and then I teach them how to regulate their breath, right? Because it's easy to go to someone, do box breathing and you can regulate your breath. Throw someone in like water that's 8 degrees, 9 degrees, and then get them to regulate their breath. That's a tool they're going to take with them for their entire life, right? So we have a conversation about how they can utilize that in exams before a big game of sport, whatever it is, So it's really about empowering these kids to be their best.
It's fascinating stuff, and I'm sort of a big into the breathing. I'm hoping to train in that next year, actually, because I think it's incredibly powerful with the kind of psychological work. And I do think that, teenage boys and teenage girls in some respects as well are really lacking in role models. And I think as parents, we don't always get it right. I know, each of my kids, I always say to them, I've done my best, but, my best probably isn't good enough. And that's okay. That's okay. We're all parents are humans. So I think it's really, really powerful. You've taken this one step further, haven't you, and written a book called The Little Book of Big Emotions. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So during COVID, basically, we weren't able to go into schools. And when I speak to teenagers, there was just this overarching theme in hundreds of teenagers. Like, I asked this question, what is your big emotion? And it would be angry, depressed, and anxious. And what we've seen in 2022 is stressed has been added into the mix, particularly. Like that was a word that I didn't hear before 2022, but now I hear it all the time. So I started asking myself the question, how can I teach young people emotional intelligence on scale? And that's when the idea, I guess, like all good ideas in the shower, it was like, write a book. And there was a battle in just going through the process of that, right? Like, I'm not an author, I'm not this, I can't, et cetera, et cetera. But then I just started telling people about it. And the more people I told, the more confident I kind of got and felt there was a need for this type of book. And basically, someone who's got the book said, this is a tool to teach parents how to communicate with their kids in a simple way around their feelings. So people don't know how to have conversations around their feelings. So they've got a book that basically the kids can write in. So for example, if it goes to like Angry Alex, there's a bunch of questions there. So it's kind of like, it says, hello, my name is Alex. So it explains what the emotion is. Like, I feel my emotions in my hand. They close and get tight. I can get a headache when I'm angry. Sometimes I shout. Sometimes I cry. I just want to be alone. I like when you ask me questions and be curious. I may not be ready, but when I am ready, I will talk to you. So it's like teaching kids what anger is and how to, and knowing that all these things are okay.
Yeah.
Because anger gets a bad rap, right?
It does.
You can't be angry. You can't be angry, but that's just crazy because they're gonna, if they can feel the anger and they can understand what's underneath it. And that's what I've had dads kind of say to me, like, so on the other page of that, it's like a little calendar that would sit on your desk. So, and my vision is I'll go to my vision in a minute, but so in angry, it goes, before I got angry, I was. When I'm angry, I feel. So, and a kid wrote, I feel sad. So the dad instantly went, oh, well, let's flip over to the sad semi and see what's going on there. So don't even go down to the next levels, right? And then when I'm angry, I talk to. So it gives kids permission to go, oh, if I'm angry, I've got permission to talk to someone about it. And then when I stopped feeling angry, what were you doing when you stopped feeling angry? Can you do that? Can you shorten the amount of time that you feel that emotion? So it's like CBT, right? But for kids, and parents can basically they can just give the book to the kids or they can sit at a table and have a conversation. But I think in the school environment, particularly, that was why it was designed the way that it was. Because I imagine that if a teacher added this into the morning routine of a bunch of 9-year-olds, so they look at the weather, what they're going to do today, how are you feeling today? And then that sits on the desk, and she's got a room full of like purple sheets. She's got a bunch of worried kids. oh, let's do Corey's box breathing meditation today. They scan a QR code and it brings up a box breathing on YouTube that goes for 5 minutes so the kids can reset their nervous system and learn a skill set, right? And then all of a sudden, if the teacher was to go back to that room and say, oh, how are you feeling now? Probably 9 out of 10, they're going to have a different emotional charge.
Yeah, it's a lovely idea. And I definitely think, I think there's a lot about bringing this sort of thing into schools. I know I've got a friend who's a teacher who was saying to me that she'd gone back to secondary school and she said, everybody's really stressed out after the lockdowns. And I said to her, just do some breathing with them. Just literally do some breathing. She said they're secondary school. And I said, honestly, just do some breathing with them. And literally 2 or 3 weeks later, she messaged me and said, I'm just letting you know, actually, we've taken that really seriously. And we've got, someone coming in to do some breathing and teach the kids how to breathe. And I do hope, sort of having had all my kids go through the school system, I do hope that, kind of 10 years from now, things like, a little bit of quiet meditation, a bit of how we're going to breathe, all of these things will just be part of the curriculum, as much as I kind of hope entrepreneurship will be really. But I think it is really powerful to, we were talking before and I was saying, I'm teaching kind of 40-year-olds different names for their emotions, and also that understanding. I used to teach a course in primary schools about anger, how to deal with your anger. Like you said, they sent all the kind of worst kids in the school who, I just grew to love. I thought they were fantastic kids, and all of them had a right to be angry. That's what I thought all of them did. And I remember going into one of the schools and I said, oh, I'm here to run the anger course. And the receptionist went, oh, we're not using that word. And I went, sorry, what word? And she said, oh, we're not using that word in school anymore. And I said, what? I literally just said, what word? And she said, we're not using anger. And I said, how can I come in and run a course about how to manage your anger if I'm not allowed to use the word anger? And she said, oh, we just felt it'd be a positive environment if people didn't use it. And I said, but then you're telling them they can't express their anger, making them suppress it. And I got really angry in the reception, that I wasn't allowed to use the word anger. And it really was, as you say, with adults too, it's a matter of just saying, am I angry, or am I frustrated, or am I sad, or am I hurt, or, what is actually going on for me? Because like you were saying, actually, for most of us who are expressing anger, we're actually expressing some level of pain or frustration or injustice. And when you can narrow it down, you can work through a solution. So I think, I agree. Yeah.
It was even interesting when I created the book, I kind of went to the local office works and I printed out a paper copy and I just had it on my desk. And when I was feeling things, I was just like going through. And then one day I was feeling something and I was like, I just went for a bike ride. And on the whole bike ride, I was in this thing. I was in this emotion. I was just like, what is that? Like, and then I come back and I grabbed the book and I was flicking through it. And I'm like, it's not even in the book. And I was frustrated, right? So I wasn't angry and I wasn't sad, but I was like frustrated about a situation. And I'm like, oh, I need to create. And I probably could have created another, there's probably another 5 or 6 characters, right? That I could, that then probably in the next evolution of the book, that will happen. But it was just really interesting. There's so many like spectrums. And what I've done is try to create a situation where you can go, oh, angry is irritated, annoyed, upset, cross, irate, So there's a whole bunch of words that kind of fit in that are emotions that fit kind of in that umbrella of that emotion.
It's absolutely fascinating stuff. And, I wish you well with it. And, I think your story is incredible, and just that power to change, actually deciding I will change this. And I love, and I think for listeners that you said, can I build my brain differently? I think that's lovely, that concept of, okay, I never say, people say I've had a breakdown, and I say, no, you've had a breakthrough. Because if you treat it right, that's exactly what it is. It's a breakthrough. And so I love the fact that you didn't even just have a breakthrough. You went, actually, I'm going to, come back, like you say, as version 10 of me rather than version 1 of me. And I think that's a really powerful concept, especially in today's world, where I think a lot of men are feeling a bit lost, actually. I definitely think a lot of men are feeling lost. I think it's a lot of women are feeling a bit lost, but definitely a lot of men feeling lost. I really want to thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing that, very honest story, and also for kind of staying on when you felt so emotional. I think that, again, that's really powerful message to people that, emotions are not bad. We don't need to not talk about them. We can talk through them and go through them. So thank you.
Yeah. I think just having that ability to go, oh, that's like, it just shows practice, right? With practice, you can go, oh, there's a load there. What's that?
Yeah,
I didn't know that was there.
Absolutely. And I think I used to be on the radio a lot more than I have been through COVID, and I always remember the first time thinking, oh, what if I cry? And then I just got as far as well, then I'll cry, and that would probably be quite useful for people. And actually, I've cried twice in my career with clients. They've told me something which has moved me to tears. And there's this big thing in the kind of the therapy world about you should never show your feelings and whatever, and I don't agree with that, and actually those moments have been very powerful for both client and I. And I remember another time, actually, I had a client who was just really going through some hard stuff, and medical stuff that we just couldn't change, and there was just this sort of quiet time when in my brain I was thinking, I just don't know what to say, because this is so tough. And he was quiet, and I just looked at him and I just said, would you like a hug? Which again is, something that's kind of seemed to be frowned on. And he said, do you know what? I just really would. And we both just stood up and we just had this hug for about a minute, just in silence. And then we sat down and we both took a breath, and then we just carried on the session. And I still remember that as being so impactful. And I think sometimes these kind of, even unstated rules and regulations about what is and isn't okay, actually you have to work with the person in front of you and what is right for them. So I would love to come on your camp. It reminds me so much of, there's just been a program on Netflix. I don't know if you saw it. And it was called Snowflake Mountain. I'm pretty sure it was Netflix, and it basically took all these kids who were really, really spoiled, and it dumped them into a camp setting, very, very much like you've talked about. And it was an interesting one, because I started watching it with the kids as just, something to watch, that we sit on the sofa, and that's our kind of sharing point in the evening as we cuddle up and we watch something. And so it was kind of a junky thing to watch. And it was obviously made to be, junky to watch, but it was actually very powerful if you watch the change in these kids. And there was this amazing kid who's actually from the UK, and they in the beginning they blow up all their luggage, and of course they bought everything they think they need, and then they have to get by. And it's so funny as it goes on, and it obviously gets colder, they're wearing just like horrible fleeces, and they've lost all style, kind of thing. And then actually at the end he says, we didn't really blow up your stuff, here is your stuff. And the kid opens the suitcase and goes, gosh, I bought so much stuff that he's just not needed. And it is, you probably find it really interesting, and it is entertaining, but I found it, and my kids found it really quite powerful to watch them make these changes. And then again it catches up with them a year later, and they've all moved out of home. None of them had moved out of home. They've all got this self-worth, which just somewhere, even with the loving parents, they'd lost along the way.
I think if every school in the world just said, all right, every kid in the transition from year 9 to year 10 or whatever their school year is, to do a week of wilderness, it would just change. And they've got the right facilitators and et cetera.
It'd be wonderful, wouldn't it?
Oh, the world would be a wonderful, wonderful place.
It would be lovely. Well, Corey, I must ask you the 3 questions I ask everybody. So going through the challenge that you went through, was there a book, film, or piece of music that helped you get through it?
I think there's the book is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. It's just a beautiful book. And I think a movie like The Power of One, I think just his experience was kind of my experience as a child, and just really, and that's something I probably resonated with for a long, long time. Didn't really understand why I resonated with it, but the reading that book, I read that book over and over and over. So probably the book is 100 times better than the movie, actually. But The Power of One and Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I think just being able to be in that situation, and for him to talk about the control that he has of his mind, and to be able to go like, no one controls. I control what's happening in my environment, within my mind, and the freedom that he had in that was just it should be compulsory reading for every year 11 student, I think.
It's very powerful, very, very powerful. Okay, and the second one is, if people listening today, they want to take some action, what's a tip you would give them, that something you can do immediately?
I think be kinder than you need to be.
Mm.
You only get to see 10%. Like even of the people that you know, like your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, like you only know 10% of what's going on in their life. So just be kind. Be 10% kinder than you need to be, right? And then the world will just be. Yeah, I think that's just my ethos in life is to be kinder than I need to be. You don't know what's going on for that guy who's cut you off. You don't know what's going on with the people in your world. You know, you don't know, like my son come home from school and is like super angry. And it was just like, I could have really taken an affront to that, but instead I just gave him his space. That being kind was giving him his space, you know? So rather than being in his face going, tell me what's going on. I need to know, because that's not about him. That's about me and like my worry and my stress. Just give him the space and knowing that when I do that, he's going to come back and say, hey, actually, this is what happened, Dad. And, you know, I think that's, so yeah, I think that's my message to the world. Be kinder than you need to be.
That's lovely. That's lovely. It's reminded me of this morning I had to apologize to my son because he told me something, again, transitioning from secondary to sixth form, which is kind of 16 to 17 here. And he told me something he was struggling with, and I just sort of got in touch with the school and kind of found the solution, you know, a part solution, and let him know. And he was really cross with me and just said, you know, I didn't ask you to get involved. And I said, you know, but I wanted to help you. And he said, you know, because I'm terribly solution orientated. And you know, and then this morning I was listening to and he said, I just wanted you to listen. And so before he went out the door, I said to him, I'm really sorry. And actually, you're right. I shouldn't have solved that for you. I should have trusted that you would resolve it. And, you know, and I had to take a bit of a to do it, because, you know, part of my brain was going, but I helped. But the other part was, you didn't ask me to.
Yeah, it's a really powerful thing. And when my son comes to me and he's in distress and I say, hey, do you want to chat? And when he comes to me, I go, hey, I just want to know, do you want advice or do you just want me to listen? And I just ask that question. That's a really powerful way for them to kind of go, he goes, but you won't just listen. So I've had to build that trust that I will just listen.
I'm great at listening, but not always. But yeah, I go, right, okay, let's go. But yeah, you have to not do that. So it's my third question before we end is, if you were standing in front of the world leaders today, what would your message be for them?
I think stop being, it's funny, when you asked me this question earlier, I told me you were going to ask this. I had like this load. I think that what they're doing for mental health is not working, right? What world leaders are doing for mental health is not working. It's actually making it worse. So we can't, in Australia at the moment, there's 800,000 people on waiting list for mental health services. We need to have, we can't put all our funding in at the back end. And it's not working, because I've had mates go to hospital and say, I'm going to commit suicide. And they go, oh, have you got a plan? Yeah, I've got a plan. What is it? Oh, okay, well, you don't really have a plan, so we'll just send you home. And then the mate executes the plan. He survived, but this, and then he ends up in a ward, right? But so what we need to be doing is like working out, how can we support, how can we provide mental health? How can we provide funding to schools? So like I spoke to my son's high school. I said, like, you guys ran this program. It didn't work. It had a negative effect on my son. I'd never, ever contact the school, but this particular time I did. And I went, here's a really good program that you guys could run, or you could run this program. They're like, oh, they're really expensive. We don't have the budget for it. And I just like, but there's still so much work to do. So any world leaders that are listening, you need to focus on preventative action. You need to be teaching people how to communicate their emotions earlier in their life. You need to be building resilience in young people. And when we do that, we're not going to be losing them to suicide. We're not going to have 15-year-olds taking their life, you know, like, and even then the statistics are skewed, right? Because single car accidents are not considered suicide, but they're highly likely that they are. Like, it just blows my mind. So we can't keep just going, we're losing people. 1 in 3 people, I think in America it was, feel lonely and isolated. I'm like, we've got all this technology to connect us, but I could monologue on this all day. So I think just preventative, get in early.
Mm.
And the organizations that you're giving money to, they're doing a shit job.
Yeah.
So find companies that aren't white collar, ticking the boxes, and go give them some money, because they're probably going to create some change.
Yeah. It's incredible, actually. Yeah, I was reading statistic, and it was that the government in the UK at the time was spending something like 7.5 billion on CBT, which is not the most effective therapy for most people, and it has a 40, I think it was something like 47% success rate, and it was like, come on, this is less than half as a success rate. And the therapy that I was trained in, it was like 76% success rate. And that was just from people who'd returned, actually bothered to return the surveys. So I agree. I think we need a huge turnaround in the way that we treat mental health. But yeah, fingers crossed. Corey, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really, really appreciate it, and your honesty and authenticness. Where can people find you if they want to get in contact?
So Big Emotions Academy, if they Google that, my website is www.bigemotionsacademy.com. They can find pretty much all my stuffs on there. On socials, my surname is a mouthful, so just Big Emotions Academy will really be the best place for them to kind of find me. They can find my website and they can contact me through there, and that's kind of my space. Everything's driving through that medium at the moment.
Lovely. And if they want a copy of the book, where would they get that? Is that on the website?
From the website.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Sure.
And
they wanted.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, and I'm here looking at the book. So the book is absolutely great. It's kind of like a desk calendar, so it stands up and you can flip it over. So it's a really nice, really kind of tactile book, lots of bright colors. So a great thing to, like you say, just have out generally. So it's fantastic. Brilliant. Okay, awesome. Corey, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Mary Williams, as you know, and thank you so much for listening to the Alternative Leader podcast. I search for guests to bring you lessons and learnings that can help move you forward in your life, help you achieve the success that you want to, in whatever way that shows up for you, to help you lead powerfully, whether that's in your own life, as your parenting, your personal, or your professional, and make you the best that you can be. If you've enjoyed the show, please rate and review it, and please share it with as many people as you think also want to move forward and gain success in their lives. If you want to find out more about me, go over to my website, which is www.mary-williams.com. That's www.mary, which is MARI-williams.com, and you'll find links to all of my social media profiles there. There's also a Facebook community that you can join, and again, all the links will be on the website too. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic day, and thank you so much for listening.